Hey, happy Sunday, everybody. This is the predictions for today's NFL football game. Besides the Philadelphia Eagles tonight, I do a longer look ahead comparing the defenses and offenses to each other and how we match up against the Seattle Seahawks. But for the other teams, this is the prediction video. For the Vikings versus Falcons, the Vikings have won 7 games in a row and are 4-1 on the road, which they are on the road today, playing the Atlanta Falcons, who are 2.1 favorites. I'm going to give that game, even though Falcons have been playing good of late, I'm going to give that game to the Vikings and say the Vikings are going to take it on the road. Devonta Freeman is back, but yet the Vikings do have a stellar defense. They have one of the best in the league. Case Keenum has 2,476 yards, 14 touchdowns, 5 picks versus Ryan's 2,884 with 16 touchdowns and 8 picks. Ryan has a 97.2 rating. Case has a 96.2. Latavius Murray has 5 touchdowns, as does Devonta Freeman. Freeman has 515 yards with a 4.44 average. Murray has 496 with a 3.82 average. The two teams' leading receivers are Adam Thielen, who has 107 targets with 1,005 yards, 14.36 average, and 3 touchdowns. Julio has a 15.74 average with 3 touchdowns on 101 targets. So due to the great defense that's typical for Minnesota, I'm going to take Minnesota in that game, and also due to the fact that they're 4-1 at home, on the road, which is big for a team to continue to be successful, which is why they have always been successful all year and persevered through many things that they had to deal with, like injuries. For Detroit and Baltimore, Baltimore is a 2.5 favorite at home. Baltimore actually has a very good defense of late. They've been playing very well. That's not going to match up great for Detroit, whose run game hasn't been playing that well lately, and they had to rely a lot on Stafford. So I'm going to take that game and give it to Baltimore. Matthew Stafford has 3,010 yards this year with 21 touchdowns and 6 picks, which gives him a 97.3 rating. Flacco has 1,875 yards with 9 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, which gives him a 74.2 rating. He's not having the best season, but yet the Ravens, partly due to Alex Collins, who has 613 yards with 4.88 average per carry, and has 2 touchdowns on the season, is why they do well. Abdullah, who hasn't been as good in the past couple weeks as he was earlier, has 5 of 5 with 3 touchdowns on 3.37 average, and the team's leading receivers are Marvin Jones and Mike Wallace. Wallace has 3 touchdowns in the year. Jones has 8, so he's going to have to do very well if the Lions do have a shot to win this game in 731 yards. But I'm going to give this game to the Baltimore Ravens. The Patriots have held opponents to 17 points or less during their 7-game winning streak. And today, they're 7.5 favorites over the Bills. Even though the Bills are at home, the Patriots are far superior than the Bills. So I'm going to give that game to the New England Patriots. Brady has 26 touchdowns and 3 interceptions with a 111.7 rating. Tyrod has 12 and 3 with a 91.7 rating. Deion Lewis has 3 touchdowns on the year. LaShawn has 4. And Brandon Cooks and Kelvin Benjamin are the two teams' leading wide receivers. Benjamin has 2 touchdowns. Cooks has 5. But that game should easily go to the Patriots. Chicago and San Francisco, I'm not even going to go into their numbers because that's just obviously not as great of a game, a care about game. But I'll give that to Chicago with a minus 2.5 advantage. 2.5 point advantage over them, and Chicago's at home, and San Francisco is going to have Jimmy Garoppolo starting this week, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. But other than that, Chicago should be able to beat up on San Francisco. Green Bay and Tampa Bay, that's going to go to Green Bay in my opinion. They are favored in the game, and these are games that Brett Hundley has to win. So when Aaron Rodgers comes back, they still have a shot. Winston has 10 touchdowns and 6 picks all season. He has an 87.3 rating. He's been struggling most of the season. Hundley has 5 touchdowns and 7 picks, a 73.3 rating. He's been struggling some as well since taking over for Rodgers, but as long as he can get the win against these not as good teams, it gives Rodgers a chance when he comes back to take the Packers into the playoffs. Doug Martin has 2 touchdowns on the year compared to Aaron Jones has 3. Mike Evans has 4 touchdowns on the year compared to Jordy Nelson has 6. That game is going to go to the Green Bay Packers, in my opinion. The Colts in Jacksonville. Jacksonville's at home, where they are very good this year, and they are also huge favorites over the Colts. And I'm going to roll with that and say Jacksonville's going to win this game. Jacoby Brissett has 9 touchdowns and 5 picks for an 86 rating all year. Bortles, who typically isn't the reason Jacksonville wins, has 12 touchdowns and 8 picks with a 79.5 rating. Fournette, who's a big part of why they win, has 6 touchdowns all year with a 4.09 average per carry. T.Y. Hilton, who has a 19.47 average receiving, has 3 touchdowns. Marquise Lee has 2 touchdowns on the year, as those are their both leading receivers. For Jacksonville, Lee's the leading receiver due to injuries on their team, so Jacksonville is going to win that game. Miami and Denver, another not-so-great game. That game should go to Denver, even though they're on the road, because Miami has been struggling far more than Denver. They've looked really bad and had no signs of anything in the past few weeks. Cutler is back, and that even in itself, really, how much does that help Miami at this point of Jay Cutler's career? He has 13 touchdowns and 9 picks with an 82.7 rating. So Lynch is out for this game, so I think Simeon's getting the start, which is not going to fare as good for Denver, but if Anderson can run well and Thomas can step up when he needs to, that game should go to Denver. Kansas City against the Jets, that's going to go to Kansas City on the road, and Kansas City is going to start winning some games again. Otherwise, they're going to be in trouble, and the Chargers could surpass them in the standings. So, Smith has 19 touchdowns and 4 picks with a 104.5 rating. McCown has 17 and 8. And Kareem Hunt and Forte are their leading rushers. Kareem Hunt's one of the best in the league this year with 890 yards and 4 touchdowns, a 4.84 average. And Matt Forte has 267 yards with 2 touchdowns. Kelsey is actually the Chiefs' leading receiver, their tight end, who has 5 touchdowns. And Robbie Anderson, who's been doing very good for the Jets, has 7 touchdowns on a 17.41 average per catch. Carolina and New Orleans, that's a great game, but since New Orleans is at home, I'm going to give that game to the Saints. Panthers have gone 6-2 since losing to the Saints in Week 3, so they're going to want some revenge, obviously, but since that game is in New Orleans, I'm going to give it to Drew Brees and the Saints, and Mark Ingram should have another good game. Kamara should have another good game, and the Saints have just been doing too well of late, other than the LA game where they were able to beat them, in order to say that they're not going to win at home against the Carolina Panthers. Brees has 16 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, which you want to think is a lot of touchdowns for Drew Brees, and that's because they have Kamara and Ingram who are tearing it up this year. Newton has 14 and 11. Again, that has part to do with because his running game's doing well too, and Stewart and McCaffrey back there. And then Funchess and Michael Thomas are the 2 leading receivers. The LA Rams in Arizona, that's going to go to the Rams on the road. Jared Goff should have a good game against Arizona, as will Todd Gurley. He has 18 touchdowns and 5 picks to Gabbert's 5 and 3. So this is a good game for Goff because he played a tough opponent last week, and now he's playing not a bad opponent in Arizona, but definitely a easier opponent. So he's be able to continue to keep on rolling especially after the momentum of beating the Saints. Gurley, again, another one of the best running backs in the league this year with 865 and 8 touchdowns. Peterson with 529 and 2 touchdowns. He's starting to slow down. Obviously, we're starting to see that at this point of his career. Fitz, who re-signed earlier this year, which is nice because he's a great wide receiver to watch, and I really didn't want him to retire. I like to keep watching someone like him. Has 4 touchdowns. And Robert Woods, who's out, so he's not their leading receiver candidate, but it still has it as him. That would then go to Sammy Watkins. He should have a good game also against Arizona. New York Giants versus Oakland. Oakland's huge favorites on their home turf, and I'm going to roll with Oakland there. Derek Carr should have a good game. He has 16 and 8 on the season compared to Geno, who's getting his first start, so that's also why I'm easily going to take the Raiders. I don't think Geno's going to do that great. Perkins isn't doing too much in the running game since coming in. Marshawn Lynch has 457 yards or 5 touchdowns, and Sterling Shepard, who should be active, is the Giants' leading receiver to Amari Cooper, who has 5 touchdowns on the season for Oakland. Tomorrow's game on Monday Night Football, which I'll do a look ahead tomorrow to look into that more strictly. The Steelers are 9-2 on a 6-game win streak and have beaten the Bengals in 5 straight of their matchups. So that game is going to go to Pittsburgh on the road, and Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, Juju Smith-Schuster are going to keep right on rolling, and Juju Smith-Schuster should have a great game. Matthew Berry recommended, and I would agree with him. If you have Antonio Brown, I would put in somebody else. I did because he's a game-time decision according to multiple reports for tomorrow's game, and you don't want to risk on Monday night having to put in some not-so-good wide receiver on one of those 2 teams because you took the risk. Get Antonio Brown, and this could be a big week going into the playoffs. You want to definitely be able to win your last game if it's big for you, and you might not be able to rely on Antonio Brown for that this week. This has been the look-aheads and predictions to this week in NFL football. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the football game. Soon I'll have one on the Eagles. Peace.